So let's go back now to our mutable sequence types Python documentation page, and looking at that it might look quite confusing. The first 5 operations are using indexing and slicing to change items in the sequence. Make sure that you're happy using indexes and slices. Review the videos in section 3 if necessary, because we'll be using slices later in this section. I'm not going to discuss them just yet because changing slices will be easier to understand once we've seen lists in more detail. So I'm going to start by discussing the append method, which is that 6th line here in that table. Now I use the term method there. A method is the same as a function except that it's bound to an object. That means we need an object in order to call the method. We've used a few functions in the last video. We used min and max and the len function. When you call a function, you just type its name and provide any arguments in parentheses. For example, len and even in parentheses gives us the number of items in the list called even. When we call a method, we tell it which object it's called on. In other words, which object it should be using when it performs its function. For example, the entry we're looking at in the table is s.append and x in parentheses. So that means that we'll be appending x to a list called s. We pass x as an argument so that the method knows what to append. But we don't have to use an argument to tell it which list to append to, because that comes at the start before the dot. Dot notations used a lot in object-oriented programming, and we'll learn more about it in the OOP section of this course. Before we learn how to write our own methods, we'll be using a lot of methods that Python's built-in objects have. The syntax is simple. You start with the object you're using, then a dot, then the name of the method. If the method needs arguments, you put them in parentheses after the method name. So we start with the name of an object. The documentation uses S because it's talking about sequence types. After the dot, we have the name of the method that we want to call, in this case append. If the method needs any arguments, they appear in parentheses after the method name. The parentheses are still needed even if there are no arguments. That's the same as when you call a function. Alright, so back to the code now. The append method can be used to add a new item to a list. Now we used append in the mutable.py program that we've written previously, so let's go open that up, specifically down here on line 21. That appended cream in this case to our list. I'll run the program again just so we can see what's happening. When the list is printed on line 18, it contains 7 items. Line 20 prints the message adding cream to make it easy to see what's happening in the output, and line 21 uses the append method to add cream to the end of the list. So moving on lines 22 and 23, when we print the list, it now contains cream, and you can see that in the output down the bottom of the screen. Alright, so we've seen what methods are. They're functions that belong to an object. In this case, the append method belongs to anything that's a mutable sequence type. We've also talked about dot notation, which is used when you want to call an object's methods. In the next video, we'll write a simple program to demonstrate using append on a list. See you in the next video.